We were talking about Ricky Gervais before the break, and every time he does a controversial Netflix stand-up special, particularly when he makes fun of trans issues, there's a certain clip that does the rounds. It's from back in 2019, so have a listen.
Making fun of transgender people, if people on the internet get upset about it, the comedian's always like, bad luck! That's my job. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm meant to challenge people. If you don't like being challenged, don't watch my shows. What's the matter, guys? Too challenging for you? That's my job. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm meant to challenge people. If you don't like being challenged, don't watch my shows. What's the matter, guys? Too challenging for you? That's my job. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm meant to challenge people. If you don't like being challenged, don't watch my shows. What's the matter, guys? Too challenging for you? Oh yeah, because you know it's been long overdue a challenge? The trans community. Oh, they've had their guard down for too long, if you ask me.
James Acaster there, fantastic comedian, slightly overusing the comedic technique of repetition there, but I've got legendary comedian and screenwriter Graham Linehan with me. Graham, what do you make of this clip?
Well, you know, here's the thing. I consider someone like James McAllister to be what I call a regime comedian, in that he makes comedy that's acceptable by the current regime, which is the left-wing kind of stranglehold over the arts and culture. That includes like left-wing beliefs that men can be women and children need to be put on, permanent medical pathways. He would not say a word about any of these issues himself. So the only way he can go viral is by attacking a comedian who's brave enough to address these issues. Now, there's a separate conversation to be had over whether Ricky's stuff is hacky, you know. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of his. I'm not a huge fan of anti-woke comedy. I think like woke comedy and anti-woke comedy is equally. It's just a waste of our time because it's based on nonsense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes I feel that people watch comedy to get upset about it. Left-wing people or woke people watch Ricky Gervais to get upset, and then people on the right do the same with James Acaster or whoever it is. In fact, I used to do a show every month at Top Secret Comedy Club in London, and they got a complaint email in that said, we came to see Leo Kearse's show in July, and it was horrific and offensive and terrible. And we came back to see it again in October, and he was still horrific and offensive and terrible. When are you going to stop booking him? And it's like, there are other entertainment choices. But some of the criticisms that are levelled.
The food was terrible, but such big portions.
Yeah. And some of the criticisms against Ricky Gervais are that he punches down. I mean, this seems in itself to be quite a sort of a transphobic thing to say that trans people are on a lower rung in society. It seems a strange thing to say since trans people seem to be making all our laws at the moment.
Yeah, and they have an awareness week every week. As someone pointed out today, there's no week that you're not allowed to be aware of trans people. And McAllister's routine is like very dishonest in a very specific way that I really want people to try and take on board. We still do not know what the word transgender means or transgender people. So when McAllister says, "Oh, these poor people," who's he talking about? Eddie Izzard, who's probably richer than McAllister is, whose career is more secure than McAllister because he's trans, so he has like that extra degree of protection around him. Because people like McAllister are now being paid to look the other way on these issues, And so, as I say, if you think about all woke comedians, Trevor Noah, you remember before Trevor Noah, Jon Stewart used to go viral every week. And then Trevor Noah came along with the arrival of kind of woke comedy and woke opinions, which is always the opposite to what it's supposed to be. It's people who are deliberately asleep to what's going on. And none of their stuff goes viral. It never goes viral. McAllister only goes viral when he's attacking a braver comedian.
That's interesting. Hopefully we'll go viral by attacking him. But I mean, it's interesting that
that's the hope. That's always the hope, isn't it? That's what we're all depending on. It's the only way to win this stupid fight. Because there's no adults in the room who are actually saying, hang on a sec, this is nonsense.
Yeah, and people like James Acaster, I mean, he's saying he's standing up for trans rights, and he seems to think he's an anti-establishment comedian, as if the establishment, the BBC, the Guardian, all the left-wing people who run all our institutions are somehow, terrible transphobes, when we know that the opposite is absolutely true. And also, I mean, would you say that if we want to protect trans children, I mean, the idea that we're protecting them by putting ideas in their heads and giving them hormones and puberty blockers and putting them on a pathway to irreversible surgical procedures, I mean, that doesn't seem like protecting them to me.
Yeah, and it's why I'm so angry at our comedians. Like Acaster only kind of comes into our view because he does this attack on. But Frankie Boyle is a very good example. Limmy is another example. Where are all the comedians who are supposed to be hard-hitting truth tellers? They have deliberately looked the other way while some terrible, terrible things have happened. And, I'm delighted when something like this comes up and I get a chance to say it because I think they're despicable. I think they've let down comedy. They've let down the women in their lives. They've let down children, and they will be remembered by history as villains, as pure villains.
Yeah, well, we'll see who's left standing to write the history books. Graham, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great Hogmanay, and I'll speak to you soon. And turning to my panel, what do you make of Acaster having a go, Lewis?
There's so much to unpack. So, I mean, obviously, as someone that is bisexual and part of that community, the trans debate has gotten so toxic. And I always go back to, imagine you are, a young kid watching GB News right now, your parents have got it on, and you're trans, and you do want to talk about it with them, and then you've just listened to something like that, and you're not doing it for attention, you're not doing it because you want to get in the girls' bathroom, you genuinely have gender dysphoria. And I think that this is a real issue of our time, and I think that we're trying to figure out what the best thing to do for everyone is, and how do we accommodate people that are trans, and what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. And it is so easy to start chipping away at, well, that makes no sense, and we can make a joke out of it. And there are real people there that, and of course,
I've got to take issue with this, because you're saying, the children out there who know that they're trans. I mean, how can you know that you're trans before you've? I mean, maybe there's a small proportion of people who genuinely, will continue.
There are less than I think it's like 500,000 trans people in the UK in total.
Yeah, and there's been
it's a tiny,
but there's been a huge explosion in the number of gender clinics in the USA has gone from 3 to over 90 in just a few short years. It's suddenly become this multi-billion-dollar industry, and you've got school counsellors and teachers and people in the leftist establishment who are putting these ideas in children's heads.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I can tell that you two have swapped genders. There's a lot of this. We are talking about comedy, so let's get back on topic. So we have Gervais doing this brilliant routine, and the whole kind of the snotty reviewers who are like, oh no, he can't terribly be funny because he's popular, and I don't like that everybody's laughing at his things. But then you have Acaster, who is also a very popular comedian, and he is using Gervais's name as a punchline.
Yeah.
And that is very interesting because Gervais is popular. Now, forgive me, I am not in any way taking away from the trans debate. I'm just trying to shift our debate back onto this idea of we can joke about.
As a trans woman, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I love that, though, because I actually do. Why not? If we're talking here about clout and getting your name in the papers, I actually remember, I think it was a documentary of Joan Rivers, and she died like 10 years ago. Yeah. She was talking about her advice to the younger comics was, pick a fight with a comic that's a little bit bigger than you.
Yeah?
Because of the publicity. That was what she used to advise them to do.
Paul, so this is true. You said about Frank Boyle.
Well, Leo's a bit bigger than me. I don't really want to pick on him.
So it's a good tactic. So what? Fair play. That's just what you guys do to get ahead.
Yeah, to work.
I don't judge you guys.
Hey, you're in it now. You're sat with us. Don't you try and distance yourself.
You don't have to become one of us. For me, let's deconstruct this somewhat. The thing that always makes me chuckle slightly is this idea of punching up and down.
Yeah.
And to use progressive language, that is a social construct. Yeah, because who decides who is high and low status?
Yes.
High status, rich person. Rich trans person, what are they? Oh, are they low status now? All of a sudden, it becomes this hypocrisy. And who is the arbiter of who should be high and low status? Which is the very reason I think all things are open to comedy attack.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a nasty way. Oh, look at that. Isn't that weird? No, I don't think that's funny. And I think, going back to something you have said for many years now, it's all about meritocracy, Leo, and the audience is the judge.
Yeah.
So the reason that a room full of 10,000 people watching Ricky Gervais perform are laughing is because they find it funny. And the reason that a room full of 2,000 people watching James Acaster perform are laughing is because they too find it funny.
Yeah.
And comedy is subjective. What you can't say at any point, I don't believe, is that is the right type of comedy and that is the wrong type of comedy.
Yeah.
Now, going back to what Graham Linehan was saying, you can argue about the subject matter. And you can say, do you realise what you're joking about? Would you do it another way? What are your political views? You can take a comedian to task on that. I personally wouldn't. I would say, was it funny? Yes, it was, and leave it there.
But what's also interesting about Ricky Gervais is in his bit about illegal immigration, for example, he's repeating verbatim the accepted woke opinion. He says, "Oh, I love going down. I love it when the illegal immigrants come in." People know he's saying it sarcastically.
Yeah.
People know he's ridiculing it. But what he's saying is just the accepted woke opinion. And if Gary Lineker said it in a normal tone of voice, it would just be a regular thing for Gary Lineker to say. And it was pretty much the same with his trans material. And I just think if your worldview is so ridiculous that somebody can satirise it and make it hilarious just by saying it verbatim, just by saying it out loud, then there's obviously a problem with your opinion, with your worldview, with your opinion on immigration or whatever it is.
But it's interesting because you said about how Paul said about how, you have two different groups of people laughing at two different comedians. And that is the wonderful thing about comedy. It's so broad and it's weird because we're always making jokes, but if somebody doesn't like our sense of humour, it's all like, you're not funny. And it's like, no, probably not to you, mate, but to the person sat next to you, I am. So
exactly.
You've always got that issue as well, the personal taste. So why not have everything? Let's hear lots of different things and get lots of different opinions. It's fun.
Yeah, and I love Ricky Gervais and I love James Acaster. I'm sure James Acaster will be disgusted to hear that.